Day 1. It gets dark early. I wake up for school. It's dark. I come home from school. It's dark. It feels like the night lasts forever, reminding me that summer is over and a long school year has begun. I never liked autumn. It's slush, it's cold. It always seemed so unfriendly, so hostile to me. There was nothing good about it. Winter was a different story. Snow that reflects the sun so brightly it almost blinds you. Frost that leaves you coming home rosy-cheeked and cheerful. And most importantly, New Year's. Of course, I no longer believed in Santa Claus, but the anticipation of the holiday was still there. I just wanted it to be the end of December already. My favorite time of year. But for now, it was still November. It kept raining. I trudged home through puddles. The wind blew in my face. A light rain was falling, and it was cold. I just wanted to get home as soon as possible, to warmth and comfort. It wouldn't take me long to get there, about 10 minutes. But I just wanted to lock myself inside and not go out at all. I walked quickly, didn't even put on any music. I was afraid to get my headphones wet. As soon as I got into the building, I rushed up the stairs to my floor. My mom opened the door for me. "What took you so long?" "You'll catch a cold," she said worriedly. Sitting at the table at home with my parents and a mug of hot tea, I finally thawed out, and the sad thoughts faded into the background. Outside, the weather was getting worse. But that's outside. Here I am, at home. We're spending this evening as a family, sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea, and talking about our plans for the upcoming holidays. When the clock struck 11, my parents got up from the table. "All right, we'd better get going," Dad said, glancing at his watch. My parents were heading out to the dacha. They needed to pick up some things that had been left there since summer. Honestly, I was even glad to be alone for a few days. No, I wasn't planning on doing anything wild, but still, new opportunities would come up. I could listen to music late into the night, clean up whenever I wanted, and go to bed later too. In short, I was planning to have a good time these days. Just yesterday, after finding out about my parents' plans, I called my friend Vidya. "Come over one of these days." "My parents are gone, I'm home alone," I suggested, but he turned me down. "Nah, I can't. School, you know." And it's true, even though I was home alone, classes weren't canceled. Like it or not, I still had to get up at 7 in the morning and trek to the other end of the street. My mom distracted me from these thoughts. "Okay, listen, I'll explain everything now," she said hurriedly. "There's food in the fridge. If you run out, you can take money from the nightstand in our room. Just don't spend too much." "He knows how to cook, he won't starve," Dad interrupted. "All right, we're leaving. We'll be back late." My parents quickly got dressed, grabbed a couple of bags, and closed the door behind them. But then the door opened again. "Call us more often," Mom said as a parting word. Once I made sure I was alone and saw my parents driving away from the window, my spirits immediately lifted. Feeling energized, I turned on some music and went to the kitchen to wash the dishes. After all, someone had to clean up after our tea party. After washing 3 mugs, I went to my room to get one more. I liked having my morning coffee in my room. On my way back to the kitchen, I was humming the tune of my favorite song when I caught something strange out of the corner of my eye. I turned around. The door was wide open. Apparently, Mom had forgotten to close the door, and now the whole building could enjoy my music. How embarrassing. I hurried to close the door. Making sure it clicked shut, I turned the key. Our door was old, so you had to put in some effort to get it to close all the way. After washing the poor mug, I headed back to my room. Homework won't do itself. I never liked math, and this time it was especially hard for me. The numbers got all mixed up, The problems blurred together into one big, meaningless jumble of digits and letters. And then there was the music. The lyrics of the song got stuck in my head and kept playing ahead of everything else. I decided to try to focus and reached for my phone to turn the volume down. When I looked away from my notebook, I noticed the same strange thing again. The front door was open. For a few seconds, I just sat there, trying to process what I was seeing. That's what happens when you see something out of the ordinary. How did the door end up open again? Stories about burglars immediately popped into my head, thieves who rob apartments while no one's home. Those bastards must have seen that my parents left and decided to rob us. What if they have weapons? Either way, just sitting in my room like nothing happened would be stupid. I rushed to the door, slammed it shut, turned the key in the lock, locked it twice, and left the key in the door. Then I slipped into the kitchen, trying not to make a sound. There, I grabbed the first knife I could find and headed deeper into the apartment. Turning on all the lights and opening every closet where criminals might be hiding, I didn't find anyone. The apartment was completely empty. But still, the fear and the feeling that someone was there remained. For about another hour, I silently walked around the apartment, hoping to figure out the reason, but annoyingly, everything looked calm. The reason I was trying so hard to find, or rather, the lack of any reason at all, was really unsettling. I sat back down at the table. Back to math again. Now, with only the recent events on my mind, it was even harder to focus. Hey, did you finish the math homework? I called for help.
I'm working on Russian. With all these assignments, you'd need an eternity to get them all done.
Vidya's tired voice came through. All right, I was thinking of copying anyway. Well, at least send me the Russian homework. My brain's not working anymore. Okay, I'll send it once I'm done. 3 short beeps sounded in the receiver. Well, that's one subject down. I struggled with the problems for another half hour, but in the end, I solved them all. When I opened my notes in the diary, I was stunned. Prepare for the test, read the messy handwriting. It was already close to 1 o'clock, and I still had to get ready for the test. After sitting in my room for another 10 minutes, I went to the kitchen to make some coffee. In a situation like this, there's no way around it. While the kettle was boiling, I stared intently at the front door. What was that? Just then, the kettle started to whistle louder and louder, so I hurried to pour boiling water into my mug with the coffee I'd already prepared. As I walked back to my room with the mug, I froze when I saw the door wide open again. My knees started to shake, and a lump rose in my throat. A lump of fear. Fear. That was exactly the feeling that overwhelmed me. I clearly remember locking the door. How did it end up open? I slammed the door shut so hard it felt like it might come off its hinges. I turned the key, which was still sticking out of the lock. Click, click. 2 turns. I just stood there for a few minutes, coffee mug in hand. Then I carefully opened the door and peeked into the stairwell through a crack. Everything was in its place, but I still frantically tried to spot the reason for such strange events in the ordinary stairwell. I stood there like that for 10 minutes, maybe even 20. At that moment, I completely lost track of time. There was only one thing on my mind, to find something or someone in the stairwell who had opened the door. A phone call from the room snapped me out of my trance. At that moment, I came to my senses, closed the door, and turned the key. 2 clicks. Just in case, I tugged on the handle. The door was locked. It was Vitya calling. He said he'd sent me his Russian homework, but wasn't sure about the spelling of a few words. I thanked him and hung up. All right, I'll get up early tomorrow, copy the Russian homework, and get ready for the math test too, I mumbled, setting several alarms at once to make sure I wouldn't oversleep. I pulled off the blanket, flopped onto the bed, and fell asleep right away, not even having time to think about today's incident with the door. Day 2. The next day, I was walking home from school again. Passing by the dark playgrounds and courtyards, I felt kind of uneasy. I wasn't afraid of the dark, but the courtyards were empty. Only somewhere in the distance could I hear kids shouting on a playground and dogs barking. I felt a bit lonely and detached from the world. But knowing that I was home alone, I could do whatever I wanted. I perked up a bit and started walking a little faster. It was wet outside, and leaves were sticking along the seams of the pavement. Everything reminded me that the further it went, the worse it would get. Getting up early for school would only get harder, and after school, I just want to sleep. I imagine that feeling when the alarm rings. It's still dark outside, and it feels like it's still night, and I have to go somewhere in the middle of the night. I hate that feeling. A faint ring came from my pocket. I took out my phone. The screen was instantly covered with tiny rainbow-colored raindrops. Dad called. I put the phone to my ear. Hello.
Hello, Van. My mother and I are a little late for a few days. More things to do. The sewer is clogged again. This is here for a long time.
Okay, Dad, I'm on my way from school now. As soon as I arrive, I'll start cooking.
Well done. Take care of yourself, please.
All right. You know, I'd like to tell you about something strange that happened to me yesterday. There was silence on the line, and I went on. Yesterday, when I got home from school, someone opened our front door, even though I definitely locked it. Honestly, I checked several times, but it was definitely opened by someone. You get it?
Why didn't you call us or at least the police?
Well, I hesitated. Seriously, why didn't I call the police?
All right, take care. If anything happens, call us and preferably the police. The number is 112, just in case.
Okay, bye. I hung up the phone. The call left me with mixed feelings. On one hand, I would be alone for a few more days, but on the other, I'd have to cook, clean, and do all the other housework myself. After thinking it over, I decided to invite Vidya over again. It would be boring to stay home alone, but with a friend, at least we could have some tea together and talk. I picked up my phone again. Vidya answered almost right away. Hey, want to come over in about half an hour?
Hey. But what about homework? I really don't want to get a crappy grade again.
But I don't think we were assigned any. We had tests today, remember?
Oh, right, that's true. All right then, I'll be there in 30 or 40 minutes.
Why so long though?
I'm just not home right now. I'm at my aunt's place. I'll come to you from there.
All right, I'll wait. Chatting with my friend, I didn't even notice that I was already approaching my building. No homework and the whole evening ahead of me. I quickly ran up the stairs to my 8th floor. Suddenly, the landline phone at home started ringing. I picked up the receiver with interest. An elderly voice came through. Hello, I replied. And there was an awkward pause. You probably don't remember me. I live upstairs. I've known you since you were born, she said kindly. I wasn't really a fan of these kinds of conversations, so I decided to steer the dialogue closer to the point. I see, so why are you calling? Your mom helps me out sometimes when I'm sick. But now they've gone away, so I'm counting on you. All right, I'll come up. Is this going to take long? No, dear, it won't take long. So Irina Anatolievna, that's what she was called, and I agreed that I'd come by in 10 minutes. Before leaving, I decided to ask her the question that was on my mind. How do you know my parents left? I was coming down the stairs and ran into them. They told me they were leaving. I had to call Vitya and cancel our meeting. From his voice, I could tell he was a bit upset. Gathering my things, I went up to her floor, making sure to lock the apartment door first. She said her door was open, so I went in. She asked me to whip up something for her dinner from whatever food was there. I quickly made some porridge, put it on 2 plates, and brought it to her room. We chatted a bit over dinner. I haven't been able to get out of bed for days. You're my only hope, she thanked me. It was getting late. I sat in her room, listening to her stories about her youth, about the Soviet Union. I can't say I wasn't interested. If anything, it was more sad. Youth had passed. No grandchildren, no family. One day, I'll be old too. Will someone take care of me? There was a special atmosphere of a bygone era in her apartment. Old record players, posters, old books. It was only around 1 in the morning that I got home, locked the door, spent about an hour on my phone, and then went to bed. Day 3. In the morning, I woke up a little later than usual. A pink dawn was barely breaking through the curtains. That meant I had slept through school. I checked the time. It was 7:40, so I immediately got out of bed. Not wasting a minute, I ran to wash up. After all, being late for biology was out of the question. I decided to grab some sandwiches while I got dressed and headed out. Once I was ready, I dashed outside and headed to school. It was already almost light outside. I had to run. The day at school went by as usual, and soon I was climbing the steps back home. After coming into the apartment and taking off my coat, I went to the kitchen to whip up something to eat. After grabbing a bite, I somehow managed to do my homework and then sat on my bed with my phone. I scrolled through social media all the way until night. It was already 1 o'clock. It was dark, with only the light from my phone faintly illuminating the sides of the room. The rest of the room was shrouded in darkness. In the doorway, I saw something barely discernible in white. Fear shot through my body in 1,000 jolts, making me flinch on the spot. Madness. It stood there, staring off into nowhere. At a spot next to me, but not at me. I reflexively turned on the light, not taking my eyes off it, hoping it would disappear. The chandelier flooded the room with light, and I saw it in all its glory. A pale face with a wide grin and round eyes, as if they existed separately from the rest of the creature. Part of its long, curved neck was visible, but the rest of its body was unnaturally swallowed by the darkness. A second passed, then another, and it took a step back, completely dissolving into the darkness of the hallway, as if the light didn't reach beyond the room. I was shaking. I was panicking. My mind went blank, leaving only one question. What was that? I was afraid to even breathe and tried to do it as quietly as possible. I tried to move even a finger, but was paralyzed by the overwhelming terror of what I'd seen. I froze, waiting. My mind was a gray void. I couldn't hold on to a single thought. A cascade of terrifying assumptions sent chills all over my body. Not really understanding why, I carefully got out of bed and walked over to the desk. There, in the drawer, I took out the pocket knife my friend had given me. When I glanced at the door, I was stunned. The door was closed. So I just stood there in the middle of the room, knees shaking, clutching the knife in my hand. I stood like that for no more than 10 minutes, but to me it felt endless. Control over my body finally returned, and I moved toward the door. With the weapon in my hand, I crept toward it, taking tiny steps. Maybe there was nothing there after all. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to figure out what was happening in the hallway. "Where are you going?" came a chilling voice from the other side of the door, sending another jolt of fear through me. Only an unlocked door separated me from it. I jumped back abruptly, and all I wanted was to shrink down to microscopic size, to stop existing, anything, as long as I didn't have to face it alone. This was something that couldn't possibly exist in our world, and it knew perfectly well that I was alone in this room. But still, any unnecessary movement could provoke the creature. In the agony of fear, I certainly didn't believe it wouldn't harm me. Whatever was standing behind the door could easily come inside to me at any moment. Gathering all my strength, I quietly dragged the dresser to the door. Thankfully, it opened inward. Without wasting a second, I grabbed my phone and dialed the emergency number 112. A few seconds later, a woman's voice answered me. I even had to persuade the operator to send a patrol. After the short beeps, I became even more frightened because a deathly silence fell and I was left alone in it. Or maybe not alone. I don't know where it is now. Maybe it's still standing by the door. I don't know how much time passed, but I just kept standing by the window behind the wardrobe, holding the phone in my hand. I listened into the emptiness and noticed that, in the distance, the sound of a siren could be heard. A few minutes later, the sound grew louder, and through the window, the red and blue flashing lights faintly illuminated the ceiling of the room. The patrol jumped out of the car and ran toward my building entrance. A few seconds later, after everyone had already disappeared behind the door, an inhuman scream rang out. Heart-wrenching screams, apparently from the police officers, mixed with wild laughter. I knew exactly who it belonged to. That creature. Now I had not a shred of doubt that it was dangerous. All of this was happening right nearby, right here on my stair landing. Panic washed over me, and I couldn't even hold back a scream. Even an armed police squad couldn't stand up to that thing that had been watching me through the crack. My mind was overflowing with thoughts. I wanted to believe this was just a nightmare. I didn't know what to do. I was powerless. Day 4. I didn't even notice when I passed out, but I woke up lying on the floor. It was starting to get light. Hearing the sounds of sirens and voices, I slowly started to come to my senses. Seeing the open door, I realized that it had been in my room. The sun was shining into the apartment, and it didn't seem so scary anymore. In the stairwell, I could hear the voices of people having an animated discussion. I needed to be around people, because during my time in the room, I was always alone. The disappearance of the police officers had been noticed, and investigators and detectives were sent. Next to them, I could feel safe. I opened the door to the stairwell. Behind it, worried police officers were rushing around. Someone was arguing heatedly about their own business. Others were probably calling the station. "Get lost," one of the police officers snapped at me. I was about to go outside, but then I saw that the door was open on the floor above, where Irina Anatolyevna lived. I became wary. I went in after knocking first. No one answered. And yet, for some reason, I kept going further inside. An old lady called out from the other end of the apartment. I went to her. She was standing in the kitchen with 2 cups of tea. I gladly sat down with her. I told her everything that had happened to me over the past few days. Everything except for the encounter with that creature. She listened with interest and even told me that she had also heard noises coming from my apartment. It just felt good to see at least one familiar face in such a stressful state. Her warm, calm voice was soothing. For the first time in days, I felt at home. Sometimes I noticed that Irina Anatolyevna would freeze up and only respond to me after a few seconds. Apparently, she still hadn't fully recovered. Her pale skin was proof of that. "You know, dear, I've been feeling really unwell lately. Drop by and see me tomorrow." Her voice started to make me uneasy. I thought it would be better to go outside and see some daylight, since all my neighbors' windows were covered with curtains. Only a little light managed to seep through the worn-out drapes. I started to get up from the chair, but she raised her voice and asked me to stay a little longer. "I just want to call my mom, check how she's doing." "All right." I dialed the familiar number. A few seconds later, she picked up the phone. "Hello." "Hi, I'm so glad to hear your voice. Is everything okay over there?" "Yes, it's fine now. I really miss you. By the way, I'm at Irina Anatolyevna's place." "Who's Irina Anatolyevna?" "Well, Grandma, she's the neighbor from upstairs." "And you? Excuse me, what are you doing in someone else's apartment?" She didn't mind. I knocked and came in. "Vanya, she died 4 days ago, even before we left." I was stunned, hung up the phone, and decided to leave immediately. And then the old woman screamed from the kitchen in an inhuman voice. "Stay with me a little longer." I dashed for the exit. The hallway seemed endless. The door was impossibly far away. I tried with all my might to reach it as quickly as possible, hearing the old woman's nasty screams behind me. Time seemed to stretch on forever. I got lost within the apartment's walls. I couldn't figure out which way to turn. Along the way, there were sudden turns and strange doors that couldn't possibly lead anywhere. A sharp pain shot through my arm. The old woman dug her sharp claws into my left shoulder. I knew that if I made even a single mistake, it would be the end. Seeing the cherished door ahead, I yanked the handle. Locked. Even though I was sure that when I came in, I hadn't locked the door, and there was no way she could have done it either. Desperate, I started pounding on the door with my fists as hard as I could. The whole space was warping. Random shadows flickered in the darkness of the corridors. A bright light flooded the apartment. One of the officers opened the door from the outside. "What are you doing here?" he blurted out when he saw my hand. "All right, come on, get out of here. There's an investigation going on here." I got to my feet and saw that it was already dark outside. Had that much time really passed? I couldn't understand how it happened. I left for her place in the morning and came back in the evening. But I hadn't even been at her place for 2 hours. But that was far from my main concern. What had happened in that apartment wouldn't let me rest. What was that, anyway? Why was it there, and what did it want from me? With the coming of darkness, fear arrived as well. There were police officers nearby, though for some reason they ignored me. But they were there, and I wasn't alone, which meant I could clear my head outside. I wondered, where would I go after this? Right now, I'm safe, surrounded by people. The police won't be at my place forever. So I need to go there while they're still around, and only then figure out what to do next. I was literally in the next courtyard over, but I realized this was the end. The world is against me. This is clearly not just a coincidence or a matter of simple circumstances. When I saw that the courtyard and the entrance were empty. How could that be? It had only been 20 minutes at most. No one could have just closed the case that quickly. Looking at my watch, I became more and more convinced that none of this was a coincidence. It was 8 in the evening. I wanted to run away from there, to run from the darkness. Suddenly, my phone rang in my pocket. It was my mom calling.
"Hi, we're on our way. We'll be home in about an hour. Tidy up after yourself and make some dinner."
"Yes, sure," I replied, feeling relieved. My mom's calm voice immediately changed how I felt. Now there was no point in sitting outside. I needed to go home and wait there for my mom, who would be back soon. When I entered the apartment, I wasn't even sure if I should lock the door. I decided to leave the door unlocked so Mom wouldn't have to look for her keys and could come in faster. I was on pins and needles. I checked the time every minute. I didn't know what to do with myself, so I lay down on the bed and kept replaying the moment in my head when Mom would come home and this whole nightmare would finally be over. An hour passed. Something was wrong. A lot of time had already gone by. There wasn't even a call from her. Maybe something happened. I started to really panic. When that feeling overwhelmed me, I snapped and dialed her number. "Hi, when are you coming home?"
Hi. I'm not far from the city now. I'll be there in about half an hour.
"All right, I'll be waiting," I said happily and hung up. I felt relieved. A tingling sense of coming joy appeared in my chest. I felt confident. I guess I felt calmer. Sleepiness washed over me, and I dozed off while waiting for Mom. The last night, he woke up in complete darkness. A sticky substance was trickling down his left arm. He turns on the nightlight next to his bed and notices that on his bed lies the severed head of his own mother. Next to it is a hand, wearing his father's favorite watch. He jumps up, but doesn't leave. Instead, he keeps staring at the scene on the bed. After a few minutes, he nervously glances around the room. He turned on the flashlight on his phone and carefully stepped out into the hallway. As he walked around the apartment, he was very surprised by the strange arrangement of the doors and furniture. Now he enters the living room. He realizes for sure that the room is different. 3 identical wardrobes stood in the center of the room. He walks around them and sees an unfamiliar door, behind which there is yet another hallway. As he walks around, he keeps looking back, unable to get his bearings. From deep within, somewhere far away, a laugh echoes. The boy suddenly stops and, seeing something in the distance, starts running in the opposite direction. His escape is cut short by a closed door that, just a few minutes ago, had been open. He turns around, and it rushes toward him, but suddenly dissolves. He heads the other way, yanks at the door handle, but his hand slips through the door, beyond its space. The boy can't pull his hand back, and soon there's the sound of bones cracking, and he's left without a hand. There's a wet, chewing sound behind the door. The boy screams, cries. He almost immediately runs away from there. A window, and beyond it, emptiness. Just a black blot. As if a canvas had been stretched outside the window. He wants to jump out, but notices something and backs away. Someone grabs him by the hair from behind. He falls, and his hair is ripped out in clumps. Something crawled into his ear, and something else painfully dug into his eye. Claws tore at his insides. Streams of blood sprayed in all directions. The boy could barely breathe. A few minutes passed, and he stopped screaming and moving.